The house was perfect, or so it seemed. A sprawling Victorian relic, tucked away at the edge of a snow-covered forest, it practically dripped with old-world charm. The crackling fireplace in the living room sealed the deal for the Thompsons when they moved in just before the holidays. For Liz and Michael, it was a dream come true, their first Christmas in a home where their young children, Emily and Tyler, could grow up with memories of warm fires and snowy evenings. The first few weeks in the house were magical. Snow fell almost daily, blanketing the landscape in white, while the family unpacked and decorated. The centerpiece of their holiday preparation was the fireplace, a grand stone structure that climbed up the wall, complete with a cast-iron grate and a chimney that reached deep into the rafters. Emily, 6, and Tyler, 4, were mesmerized. The crackling flames, the scent of pine logs, the promise of Santa coming down that very chimney, it was almost too much excitement to contain. But there was something odd about it. Liz had noticed it first. When she cleaned the hearth for the first time, she found ash and debris scattered not just in the grate but across the floor, far more than seemed normal for an unused fireplace. She chalked it up to neglect from previous owners. Yet, when she lit the first fire, the flames flickered strangely, as if an unseen breeze swirled inside the chimney. By Christmas Eve, she'd stopped paying it much mind. The family had spent the day baking cookies, building snowmen, and placing the final ornaments on the tree. As night fell, the children sat by the fire, sipping hot cocoa while Michael read aloud from a worn copy of The Night Before Christmas. "Will Santa really come through the chimney?" Emily asked, her eyes wide. "Of course," Michael assured her, chuckling. "But only if you're asleep. Otherwise, he might skip us altogether." Emily nodded solemnly, while Tyler yawned, already half asleep against Liz's shoulder. The children were tucked into bed, and the house settled into a peaceful quiet. Outside, the snow fell in heavy flakes, blanketing the world in silence. But at midnight, the quiet broke. It started as a faint noise, barely audible over the sound of the wind, a scraping sound, like metal dragging against stone. Emily stirred in her bed, the faint noise worming its way into her dreams until her eyes fluttered open. The sound grew louder. A low creak, like old wood bending under pressure, then a rhythmic thump-thump-thump. Emily sat up, her heart pounding. Was that footsteps? Across the hall, Tyler's muffled voice whispered through the dark. "Emily? Do you hear it?" "Yeah," she whispered back, clutching her blanket. "It's Santa." They crept out of their beds, their bare feet silent on the cold wood floor, and tiptoed to the living room. The fire had long since burned low, but the faint glow of embers still danced in the hearth. The sound was coming from above the fireplace. From inside the chimney. Scrape. Thump. Scrape. The children froze. It didn't sound like jolly boots landing in soot, or the light jingle of reindeer bells. It sounded heavier. Sharper. Emily stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the darkness of the chimney. "Santa," she called out hesitantly. The noises stopped. For a moment, the silence was so complete it felt suffocating. Then, a low, guttural growl echoed from deep inside the chimney. "Emily," Tyler whispered, his voice trembling. Before they could turn to run, a clawed hand shot out of the darkness. Black as coal and impossibly long, its fingers wrapped around the edge of the hearth. A second hand followed, pulling a hunched, twisted form into the room. The creature was tall, its body bent unnaturally to fit the narrow chimney. Its face was obscured by a tangle of oily, matted hair, but its eyes, burning like embers, pierced through the gloom. Its mouth twisted into a sneer, revealing jagged, yellow teeth. Little ones," it hissed, its voice like the crackle of dying flames. Emily screamed, but no sound escaped. Tyler tugged at her arm, pulling her backward. As the clock struck midnight, the creature straightened, its form expanding with each chime. 1, 2, 3. Its shadow stretched across the room, swallowing the children in darkness. The children stumbled backward, their tiny feet catching on the rug as the monstrous figure emerged fully from the fireplace. Its hunched body seemed to unfold with each toll of the clock, rising impossibly tall until its head nearly grazed the ceiling. Its eyes, glowing like embers, flared brighter as it turned its gaze on them. Emily clutched Tyler's hand tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. "Mom," she finally found her voice and screamed, her cry echoing through the stillness of the house. The creature moved suddenly, with a fluidity that seemed unnatural for something so grotesque. Its clawed hands reached out, fingers curling as if savoring the fear in the room. "Emily." "Tyler." Liz's voice came from the hallway. She and Michael burst into the room, the light from the hallway lamp spilling onto the floor just as the thing melted into the shadows, disappearing from sight. "What is it? What's wrong?" Liz asked, kneeling by the children and pulling them close. There was something," Emily stammered, pointing at the fireplace. "It came out of the chimney." Michael glanced at the hearth, now empty save for a thin trail of black soot smudged across the floor. "It's okay, sweetie," he said, his voice calm but skeptical. "You probably just had a bad dream." "No." Tyler whimpered, clinging to his mother's arm. "It was real. It was big and scary." Liz stroked his hair, her own unease hidden behind a comforting smile. "Shoo, it's all right. Let's get you back to bed." The children protested, their pleas to avoid the dark falling on deaf ears as their parents guided them back upstairs. Michael lingered for a moment, staring at the fireplace with a furrowed brow before turning off the lights and following. But the house didn't sleep. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 1. Liz lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Despite the warmth of the blankets and Michael's steady breathing beside her, a chill had settled over her. The children's fear lingered in her mind, their trembling voices replaying over and over. It came out of the chimney. She sat up and glanced at the doorway. The soft night light in the hall cast long shadows, and for a moment, she thought she saw movement at the edge of her vision. She blinked, and it was gone. "Liz?" Michael mumbled, half asleep. "I'm going to check on the kids," she whispered. She padded quietly down the hall, peeking into Emily's room first. The little girl was curled up under her blanket, her face peaceful. Tyler was the same, clutching his stuffed bear. Relieved, Liz started back toward her room but stopped halfway. Something was off. The air felt colder, heavy, like stepping into a freezer. The faint scent of burning lingered, sharp and acrid, as if someone had left the fire unattended for too long. Her gaze drifted toward the staircase. At the bottom, barely visible in the dim light, she thought she saw something move, a shape darker than the shadows, slinking toward the fireplace. Liz's breath caught. "Hello?" she called out softly, her voice trembling. The shape froze. Slowly, its head turned toward her, and two glowing red eyes blinked open. Liz stumbled back, her hand clutching the banister. "Michael!" she screamed, her voice breaking the silence. The shadow lunged forward, impossibly fast. Michael woke with a start, Liz's scream tearing through his dreams. He bolted upright just as she burst into the room, her face pale and her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Something's in the house," she cried. "I saw it. Downstairs." "What are you talking about?" "Please. Just come with me." Michael grabbed a flashlight from the nightstand and followed her. The hallway was eerily quiet, and by the time they reached the staircase, Liz began to doubt herself. The red eyes she'd seen, the hulking shadow, it couldn't have been real, could it? But the smell was still there. Michael noticed it too, his nose wrinkling. "Is something burning?" He descended the stairs cautiously, Liz close behind him. The beam of the flashlight swept across the living room, landing on the fireplace. The embers from earlier were still glowing faintly, but the soot-streaked floor was now smeared with long, claw-like marks leading toward the window. "Did you see this earlier?" Michael whispered, crouching to inspect the marks. "No," Liz replied, her voice trembling. "Maybe an animal got in." Liz opened her mouth to argue but stopped as a low, guttural growl filled the room. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, reverberating through the walls and vibrating the floor beneath their feet. The beam of the flashlight flickered, and then the bulb went out. "Michael?" Liz's voice quivered in the dark. "I'm here," he said, grabbing her hand. The growl grew louder, deeper, until it became a deafening roar. The fire in the hearth flared to life, flames shooting upward as if fueled by an unseen force. And then it stepped into the light. The creature was bigger now, its limbs elongated, its claws sharper. Its face was still obscured, but its fiery eyes burned with malevolence. It tilted its head, as if studying them, before letting out a guttural laugh that shook them to their core. "The clock strikes 1, it hissed. 1 hour closer to judgment. What do you want?" Michael shouted, pulling Liz behind him. The creature didn't answer. Instead, it turned its gaze toward the staircase. Toward the children. "No!" Liz screamed, breaking free from Michael's grip and bolting up the stairs. The creature followed, its movements grotesquely smooth as it climbed the walls, its claws digging into the plaster. Liz's feet pounded up the stairs, her heart hammering as the monstrous creature slithered after her, its elongated claws gouging deep grooves into the walls. Every fiber of her being screamed to run faster, to reach her children before the thing did. "Emily! Tyler!" she shouted, her voice cracking with panic. The door to Emily's room was ajar, the faint glow of a nightlight spilling into the hall. Liz shoved it open, her breath catching as she saw Emily standing by the window, her small face pale and frozen with fear. "Mommy?" Emily whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Get to Tyler's room. Now!" Liz barked, scooping Emily into her arms and racing across the hall. Tyler was awake, sitting up in bed with wide, terrified eyes. "Mommy, it's here," he whimpered, pointing toward the door. Liz turned just in time to see the creature crouched in the hallway. Its glowing eyes bore into her, its body hunched like a predator ready to pounce. It moved slowly now, savoring the hunt. Michael appeared at the top of the stairs, wielding the fireplace poker like a weapon. "Get away from them," he roared, charging toward the creature. The thing reacted with inhuman speed, its claws swiping through the air. Michael swung the poker, but the metal passed through the creature as though it were made of smoke. It snarled, then lashed out, sending Michael sprawling against the wall. "Michael!" Liz screamed, clutching the children tighter. The creature's gaze snapped back to her, its jagged teeth glinting as it grinned. "The clock strikes 2, it hissed, its voice like nails scraping glass. The sound of the grandfather clock tolling echoed through the house. With each chime, the creature grew larger, its form more solid, its eyes burning brighter. "Mommy, make it stop!" Emily cried, burying her face in Liz's shoulder. Liz's mind raced. They couldn't fight this thing, not with poker sticks or screams. But something about the creature seemed tied to the house, to the clock, to the chimney. "Michael, the fire!" she shouted. Michael groaned, dragging himself to his feet. "What?" "The fire. Light it again." He hesitated, glancing between the creature and the staircase. "Do it!" Liz screamed, her voice desperate. Michael stumbled back down the stairs. The creature snarled, its head jerking toward him, but Liz shouted again, drawing its attention back to her. "You want us, don't you?" she said, her voice shaking but firm. "Come and get us." It tilted its head, as if amused, before lunging forward. Liz slammed the bedroom door shut and threw her weight against it. "Emily, Tyler, under the bed," she ordered. The children scrambled to obey as the creature's claws raked against the wood, splintering it with each swipe. Downstairs, Michael fumbled with the matches, his hands shaking as he tried to light the kindling in the fireplace. Come on," he muttered, striking another match. The flames sputtered to life, weak at first, then growing as they licked at the dry logs. As the fire roared, the house seemed to groan, the walls vibrating with an otherworldly hum. Upstairs, the creature paused, its clawed hand inches from breaking through the door. It turned its head sharply, as if hearing a distant call. Liz felt the pressure against the door ease, then vanish entirely. She pressed her ear against the wood, her breath catching as she heard the thing retreating. Michael fed more logs into the fire, his heart pounding. The flames cast long shadows across the room, flickering wildly as the temperature in the house seemed to rise. A low growl echoed from the chimney. Michael stepped back, his eyes fixed on the hearth as the creature's shadow appeared within the flames. It writhed and twisted, its form distorting as it clawed against the barrier. "You think fire will stop me?" it snarled, its voice echoing like a thunderclap. "This is my domain." Michael grabbed the poker again, his grip tightening. "Get out of my house," he growled. The creature laughed, a deep, guttural sound that shook the room. "Your house? Foolish mortal. This house was mine long before you came." The flames surged, turning a deep, unnatural shade of green. The creature's form grew clearer, its twisted limbs and grotesque face emerging from the inferno. Michael's grip faltered. He was out of his depth, and he knew it. Upstairs, Liz peeked out of the bedroom, her pulse still racing. The hallway was empty, but the air was heavy with an oppressive heat. "We have to go," she said, pulling the children from under the bed. "Come on." She led them cautiously toward the stairs, but as they reached the top step, the fire below flared, and the creature roared. Its voice was deafening, shaking the house to its foundations. "You cannot escape," it bellowed. "Not until the final stroke." Liz froze, her mind racing. The final stroke. Midnight had long passed, but the creature's power seemed tied to the clock. "Michael," she shouted over the noise. "The clock. Smash the clock." "What?" he called back, his face pale as he glanced between the fire and the monstrous form within it. "The grandfather clock. Break it." Michael hesitated for only a moment before running to the hallway. The clock stood ominously, its pendulum swinging in slow, deliberate arcs. With a yell, Michael swung the poker, shattering the glass face. The pendulum stopped, and the chimes died mid-stroke. The creature screamed, its form convulsing violently. The flames in the hearth surged, then extinguished in an instant, plunging the room into darkness. When the lights flickered back on, the house was silent. Michael stood in the wreckage of the hallway, the shattered clock at his feet. Liz clutched the children tightly at the top of the stairs, her eyes scanning the room below. The creature was gone. "Is it over?" Tyler whispered, his voice trembling. Liz didn't answer. Her eyes lingered on the fireplace, where faint wisps of smoke still curled upward, as if something deep within the chimney was still smoldering. The house was unnaturally quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort, it suffocates. Liz clutched Emily and Tyler close as Michael stood motionless, staring at the shattered remains of the grandfather clock. The pendulum hung at a crooked angle, the ornate carving splintered and broken. The air was still heavy, thick with the acrid scent of burnt wood, and though the creature was gone, Liz couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Michael finally broke the silence. "We need to get out of here. Now." Liz nodded. "Go. I'll grab coats." A loud thud cut her off. It came from the chimney, echoing through the hollow stone passage. Michael whipped around, gripping the fireplace poker. "No. No, it's gone. I broke the clock. It should be over." Another thud. Then a scraping sound, slow and deliberate, like claws against brick. Liz's voice trembled. "It's coming back." Before Michael could answer, a deep, guttural laugh rumbled from the chimney. The embers in the hearth flared to life, casting long, flickering shadows on the walls. "You thought time could bind me?" the voice sneered, each word dripping with malice. "The clock was but a tether. I am eternal." Liz backed away, pushing the children behind her. "Michael, do something." The poker trembled in his hands. He swung it toward the fire, but the flames shot upward, forcing him to stumble back. The creature's twisted, shadowy form began to emerge once again, its ember-like eyes burning brighter than ever. The children screamed as the creature's hulking figure loomed over the room, its jagged teeth glinting in the firelight. "Run!" Michael yelled, shoving Liz and the kids toward the stairs. "No!" Liz protested, her eyes darting between the monster and her husband. "Go! I'll hold it off." She hesitated for a moment, then grabbed Emily and Tyler's hands, pulling them toward the door. They raced down the hallway, their footsteps echoing like gunshots in the eerie stillness. Behind them, Michael swung the poker again, his strikes useless against the creature's incorporeal form. It laughed, its voice like the groan of a dying fire. "You cannot fight me, mortal. This house is mine. Your fear, your pain feeds me." It lunged forward, its claws tearing through the air. Liz pushed the front door open, the icy wind stinging her face as they stumbled into the snow-covered yard. She turned, expecting Michael to follow, but he wasn't there. "Michael!" she screamed. Emily and Tyler clung to her, their small bodies trembling in the cold. Inside the house, the firelight flickered violently, casting grotesque, shifting shapes against the windows. Liz could hear the creature's guttural growls and Michael's shouts of defiance. Tears streamed down her face. She couldn't leave him. "Stay here," she whispered to the children. "Don't move." "No, Mommy." Emily sobbed, grabbing her arm. "Don't go back." "I'll be right back," Liz said, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "Stay together. I promise." She turned and ran back inside. The heat hit her like a wall the moment she stepped through the door. The living room was a chaotic swirl of fire and shadows, the creature's massive form towering over Michael. "Liz, get out of here," he shouted, his voice raw. "No," she yelled back, grabbing the first thing she could find, a heavy brass candlestick from the mantel. The creature turned toward her, its ember eyes narrowing. "You," it hissed, its voice like the crackle of a dying fire. "You dare defy me?" Liz's hands trembled, but she didn't back down. "This is our house. You have no power here." The creature laughed, its jagged teeth glinting in the firelight. "Foolish woman. This house is built on pain, on fear. Your love cannot save you." Michael lunged at the creature, swinging the poker with all his strength. This time, it struck true, the metal connecting with the creature's shoulder. It roared, stumbling back into the fireplace. "Now, Liz!" Michael shouted. "The fire! Get the salt!" Liz's eyes darted to the kitchen. She bolted, her bare feet slipping on the wood floor as she grabbed the ceramic salt jar from the counter. The creature snarled, clawing its way out of the flames. Its form flickered, less solid now, as if the strike had weakened it. Liz ran back to the living room, the jar clutched tightly in her hands. "Keep it in the fire," she yelled, tossing a handful of salt into the flames. The fire roared, the flames turning bright white as the salt crackled and hissed. The creature screamed, its form writhing as the salt seemed to burn it from within. "You cannot banish me," it bellowed, its voice a mixture of rage and pain. "I am bound to this place. I am eternal." Michael grabbed Liz's hand, pulling her back as the creature thrashed. "Keep going," he urged. Liz threw another handful of salt into the fire, the white flames consuming the creature's shadowy form. Its screams grew louder, then faded into a low, guttural growl. Finally, the flames died down, leaving only smoldering embers. The creature was gone. The house was silent again, save for the faint crackling of the dying fire. Liz collapsed onto the floor, her body trembling as tears streamed down her face. Michael sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders. Is it over?" "I don't know," Liz whispered, her voice barely audible. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the night pressing down on them. Outside, Emily and Tyler's cries brought Liz back to her senses. She scrambled to her feet, running to the front door. The children threw themselves into her arms, their tears soaking her shirt. "It's okay," she whispered, holding them tightly. It's over. We're safe now. But as she looked back at the house, her heart sank. The faint scent of burning still lingered in the air, and deep within the chimney, a single ember glowed. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. The battle had left its mark, deep gouges marred the walls, soot streaked the floors, and the air was thick with the lingering scent of smoke. Liz stood on the porch, holding her children close, her eyes fixed on the fireplace through the open front door. Michael joined her, his face pale and streaked with sweat. "We can't stay here," he said firmly. "Whatever that thing was, it's not gone for good." Liz nodded, her gaze drifting to the children. "We'll pack a few things. Just enough to get us through the night. We'll stay at a motel." Michael hesitated. "I don't think we should go back in at all." "We don't have a choice," Liz whispered. "The kids need coats. Shoes. We'll be quick." Michael glanced at the house, unease etched into his features. Finally, he nodded. "Fine. 5 minutes. Nothing more." Inside, the house felt heavier than before. Every step echoed unnaturally, and the faint ember glow in the hearth seemed to watch them. Liz hurried to the children's rooms, gathering their favorite blankets and stuffed animals. Emily and Tyler clung to her as if letting go would bring the creature back. Michael worked quickly downstairs, grabbing jackets, car keys, and a few essentials. He avoided the living room as much as possible, but his eyes kept drifting to the fireplace. The ember was still there, faint but persistent. He approached cautiously, gripping the fireplace poker. As he stared into the depths of the chimney, a cold draft brushed against his skin, carrying with it a faint whisper. Tick, tock. Michael stumbled back, nearly dropping the poker. "Liz," he shouted, his voice trembling. "We need to go. Now." Upstairs, Liz heard the urgency in his voice and didn't argue. She grabbed the children's hands, leading them quickly toward the stairs. Just as they reached the top step, the grandfather clock's chime echoed through the house. Dong, dong. It was impossible. The clock was shattered, its pendulum broken, its face cracked. Yet the chimes continued, deep and resonant, each one louder than the last. Dong, dong. Liz froze. "Michael," she called out, her voice shaking. He appeared at the bottom of the stairs, his face pale. "Move. Get to the car." The house began to tremble, the walls groaning as the clock struck again. Shadows flickered across the hallway, twisting and writhing like living things. Behind Michael, the fireplace roared to life, flames erupting in a violent burst of white and green. The creature's jagged form emerged from the inferno, its ember eyes blazing with fury. "You thought you could escape," it snarled, its voice shaking the house. Michael grabbed Liz's arm, pulling her and the children down the stairs. "Run." The family bolted toward the door, the creature's guttural growls echoing behind them. The shadows seemed to reach for them, clawing at their heels as they burst into the frigid night. The car sat under a thick layer of snow, but Michael didn't hesitate. He shoved the children into the back seat as Liz fumbled with the keys. Come on," she muttered, her hands shaking as she unlocked the doors. Michael threw himself into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine sputtered, then roared to life. The creature appeared in the doorway, its massive form silhouetted against the fiery glow of the house. It stepped onto the porch, its claws raking across the wooden railing. "Go!" Liz screamed. Michael floored the gas pedal, the tires spinning for a heart-stopping moment before the car lurched forward. Through the rearview mirror, Liz watched as the creature moved to the edge of the porch. It didn't follow. Instead, it stood there, its ember eyes fixed on them as the house burned behind it. They drove for miles, the snow-covered forest giving way to open roads and the distant glow of a town. The children were silent in the back seat, their faces pale and tear-streaked. Liz held them close, whispering reassurances even as her own heart raced. Michael pulled into the parking lot of a small motel, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. "We're safe now," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Liz looked at the children, then at the darkened forest beyond the motel. "Are we?" That night, as the family huddled together in the small, musty room, Liz couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed the events over and over, the creature's ember eyes haunting her every thought. Around 3 a.m., she got up to get some water. The faucet in the bathroom groaned as she turned it on, the sound unnervingly loud in the stillness. As she splashed water on her face, she glanced at the mirror, and froze. Behind her, faint but unmistakable, was the glow of two burning eyes. She spun around, her heart pounding, but the room was empty. In the distance, faint and far away, she thought she heard the toll of a clock.